All right. Hi, everybody. This is Brian and Rachel Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company and inknouveau.com. This is Right Time at 9, our live weekly, lately it hasn't been very weekly, but our somewhat weekly broadcast that we do to kind of just let you know the happenings of the Goulet Pen Company and our general feelings about fountain pens, and to kind of just hang out and talk. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We've done like 70 of these things by now, so we've got quite a lot. And this is our little baby girl. She's about 8 weeks old, and she just, ate, and she's nice and awake, and hopefully not going to get too upset, but you never know. My chat's up. Yay. But anyway, we have a bunch of stuff to talk about. This week's broadcast, we're going to be doing a special guest phone thing. We're doing a video recording of this that we'll put up on YouTube, but we're having Jamie Grossman of Hudson Valley Sketches, her blog. She does some other Hudson Valley artwork and stuff like that. She's known for doing acrylics and watercolor and some really cool, more artistic kind of stuff. We are known more for the fountain pen stuff, and there's kind of some crossover between her art world and our fountain pen world. And, we followed her blog. We found her blog, a while ago, maybe a year or so ago, and been following it and enjoying it. She does do a lot of stuff about fountain pens, or about fountain pen inks anyway. And ink is kind of our thing. So, we had the idea to collaborate and get together and do some fun stuff. And that's where this broadcast came from. So anyway, we will get with her in a few minutes, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. But we wanted to get through some logistical Goulet Pen Company stuff first. We've had some new products coming in, and we have new products that are going to be coming in soon.
It's getting kind of exciting around here.
Yeah, there's definitely, around the first of the year, things were a little slow. We're in a whole lot of new products coming in. We had some price increases, and that's not very exciting, but, there are now some new products, new 2012 products that are starting to roll in, and things are getting kind of exciting. So, we're going to be taking any questions that you guys have in the chat, but we'll just kind of go ahead and cover what we think is probably on most of your minds.
Black AHABs, pink AHABs, those are in stock, and we still have a bunch. Quantities were limited, but we did snag a whole bunch, so we should be good for a little while, but I wouldn't delay too long. We could sell out. There should be more to follow not too long from now, but I really don't know. Mm-hmm. So those are very exciting. There's also a black slim flex pen and a medieval lapis that's new as well. Mm-hmm. Diatramentis magic inks. And you want samples? Oh, I haven't listed the samples yet.
We've been working on those.
They've been doing them. I haven't listed them on the web yet.
Oh yeah, okay.
So I'm gonna go ahead and put that on my to-do list. I will try to get those up by tomorrow. As well as the wine series. We've had some of it come in. The rest should be here any day, as well.
Yeah, we're still waiting on some of the whiskeys and some of the other
half of the wines.
Yeah.
And we're restocking. We're trying to do our best to keep it in stock. Usual turnaround time has been about 6 to 8 weeks, but we're trying to work with them on a faster shipping to see if we can get it faster. It'll cost us a bit more, but I think it's worth it. So
yeah,
I'll keep you posted on that. So just keep watching our site for new Diatramentis colors.
Mm-hmm. The modern platinum modern maquillés.
Modern maquillé, that's one series. Those are the ones we got a little bit ago. We have 2 of the designs. There's actually a third out there. We accidentally got one today, so I guess we'll just start having to carry it.
Okay.
I haven't listed on the site yet, but I'll have to do that. And then the new, I want to say Kanazawa. Is that right?
Sure.
It's basically another maquillé with gold leaf technique. And I'll have to share a link. It's really cool how they do that. But the modern maquillés, and someone mentioned they're gorgeous. Why are they so much less expensive than other ones you've seen? These series have part machining, so they're like screen printed, and part handwork. So they're not 100% done by hand. Mm-hmm. But there is a handwork element, especially these with the gold leaf. That's definitely hand applied.
And that's why the gold leaf ones are a little more expensive than some of the other modern maquillés.
Yeah, the modern maquillé series is around $144, and this new Kanazawa, I hope I'm remembering and saying that right. It basically means gold leaf. Is I want to say $160. $176, $180, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, then we have that Radiant Dragon Maquille. That's full-on maquille, and that one's $800. That's a whole different story.
That's typically what you see with,
and it's limited edition
with
as well.
maquille and urushi lacquer and that kind of thing. That stuff is very labor intensive. Takes a long time to do, like upwards of 2 years. And
that's why they're often limited editions, because
they're limited edition and they're incredibly expensive. And frankly, there's not a lot of people in the world that can do it.
No.
It's a very ancient technique. It's a very specific technique. And normally these pens are incredibly expensive. But the modern maquilles and these other ones are...
And they have a gold nib, so...
Well, yeah, I mean,
very affordable.
And honestly, we had gotten some samples a while ago, and, we were always very attracted to them. And recently, as I've kind of grown more in my own photography skills and gotten into doing macro photography, and I just thought that these would be mommy I just thought that these modern maquilles would be the perfect thing to experiment with my macro photography, in that it would be a really great way to kind of practice my own skills with photography and also show off some really nice looking pens. And, the reception to them has been very warm, and everyone has really gotten intrigued with these pens. And frankly, we are falling in love with them as well. So we're kind of diving in with the maquille type stuff. And, I don't know if we'll look into the full-on maquille anytime soon. Certainly if there's interest, and we can always...
we get special order.
We can always special order things, but I don't know if we'll carry that stuff regularly yet.
It's a lot of money.
Not until I get my D800 or whatever, but... Anyway, so that stuff is cool. I'll be taking new macro pictures of the new maquilles that we got in.
And new pictures of the Noodler's pens. We didn't get to it this afternoon.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, Iroshizuka surprised us. We weren't supposed to get it till March, but all of a sudden we got a shipment yesterday of 4 new Iroshizuka colors. So these have already been available in Japan since late last year, but now they're finally available in the U.S., so we're very excited about that.
Yes, and I've got them swabbed up. They're in the swab.
Samples are on the site. They're not in the swab shop yet.
Oh, they're not in the swab shop yet.
On my to-do list.
Swabs are up, but they're on the website, right?
Yep.
With the swabs.
Yep.
So you can see what those colors are like. They're pretty nice colors, very subdued, but they're good shading, good flow, just everything that you would expect from Iroshizuku. So the little baby girl. That takes care of about all logistics.
Then there's all the stuff
new
that's
stuff.
coming.
There is stuff coming. We've got Twisby.
Clear 540s will be here next week. Colored 540s and the VAX 700 colored will be here around the first week of March. That's the latest timeline I have. But clear 540s, and I believe the italic nib units, all the nib units should be here next week. And RSC 100s, we'll get some more of those in too. And Twisby ink bottles.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of other new stuff. You can check the coming soon page of our site. We're expecting a Kawako shipment any day now. They said it was shipping this week of all those nib units. And restocking of all the nib sizes we're out of and all the bodies we're out of. Because those are all special order from Germany, so it took a little while.
Yeah.
So just check the coming soon page on our site. I try to keep the timelines, the dates as updated as I possibly can. So, and there's like a Pelican M600 white tortoise. We are taking special orders for that. So if you're interested, shoot us an email.
Yep.
All right. I think that's all I got.
Is that about the logistics? If anybody has any other questions, I told Jamie we'd call her about 10 minutes in. So. If everybody is ready for her, we can go ahead and kind of dive in. So let me go ahead and give her a call and get her on the phone.
Let me see if I can swing this girl up.
Okay. Just give me 1 second.
Sorry.
We got new phones and I'm not quite sure how to redial here. Hopefully Ellie will be behaved. She was kind of noisy last time. Okay. I don't know how to work my own redial, so I've got to find the number again. Bear with me, everybody.
Can you just get her in the... No, she'll be in color.
Just bear with me. Hi, Jamie. All right, I'm going to put you on speakerphone, okay? All right. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. First, I want to make sure everybody can hear you okay. If you guys can just holler in the chat, let me know if I need to move the phone or whatever. We're very low tech here. I basically just have her on a handset phone, and it's kind of recording into the microphone along with everything else. So hopefully the audio is pretty good. But
Can everybody hear me?
you might hear the swing creaking in the background, a little baby swing, but okay. If everybody can hear you okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, Jamie, you and I have, emailed back and forth quite a bit. We kind of keep an eye on each other's blogs. I've had you do some guest posts on Ink Nouveau before.
Yes.
And I'm a big fan of all of the, watercolor washing and all of the, I'll say, peripheral uses of fountain pen ink that you do, because most of what we tend to do with fountain pen ink is just ink it up in a pen and use it. But you do some creative stuff with it.
Well, it seems that more and more artists are using fountain pens, at least in their sketchbooks. And I guess all of this plays into why light fastness is an issue that can matter. Because every once in a while you get that sketch that would sure look nice in a frame on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to know it was done with and how it will hold up on the wall. And I think that, light fastness is not necessarily an issue. In the sense that if you're writing your grocery list or making doodles or notes to yourself or sketches or letters that'll be kept in a file, it doesn't really matter if something is light fast or not.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're taking important notes on something and you're going to leave them on your desk and that desk will be exposed to sunlight for a few hours a day, it's surprising how quickly some of these inks can disappear.
That's true.
So it's always good to know, and then you can make sure that whatever ink you use suits your application.
Absolutely.
If it makes a difference or not.
Let's give a little bit of background about maybe what these tests are, and for anybody that's not aware, kind of the reason we're having Jamie on is because she had been doing some light fastness tests, basically seeing how sunlight affects how much fountain pen inks can fade, and she was kind of using just the inks that she had on hand and just wanted to swab them up and put half of them away in a closed book and the other half in sunlight, kind of hanging up in the window, and see which inks fared well and which ones didn't. And she had done a few of these tests on her own that I'd kind of just stumbled upon on her blog, and it was really intriguing to me, especially because Noodlers, for anybody who's familiar with that brand, most people are, they have a classification of their inks called eternal inks, which are classified as UV resistant. And I thought it was really interesting to maybe stress test some of these UV resistant inks and see maybe which ones held up better than the others, and see kind of how they fared compared to other fountain pen inks that maybe didn't have this UV resistant classification. Really, there was no real motivation other than just pure curiosity on my part of why I wanted to do this. And I would have loved to been able to do it myself and blog about it, but Jamie had some experience doing it, and I offered to supply her with samples of all of these inks. I think we ended up doing, how many was it, 32 colors, I think?
32, and there were other things that I wanted to do also. That is, very often artists want to know, you probably get asked this question a lot, does the ink wash?
Yeah.
So if I do watercolor over this ink sketch, is it going to run all over the place, or is that ink going to stay put? And if it's going to wash, how much is it going to wash? And if it's going to wash, is it going to break into different colors when it washes? And then that also brings up other light fastness questions, because when the ink washes and there's a much thinner application of the ink on the page, how long is it going to take for that to fade versus the Q-tip swab? So what I did when I set up the tests is I did a double Q-tip swipe, so that there was essentially a double thickness of ink on the page, and then I did a single Q-tip swipe, and then I made a cross-hatched section. Then I took a wet brush and I washed half of that cross-hatched section. This is after I dried it with a hairdryer to be sure it was absolutely dry. That way I could see how much the ink was going to wash, and also that section that was washed may or may not fade faster than the sections that were not washed. So I could get to see whether that thinner application of the ink played a role in the light fastness of the ink. And then I wrote the ink name on both sides of the piece of paper. Then essentially I cut the paper right down the middle so that half went into the window. That way, when it came time to reading results, I could actually put the halves of the page side by side, and the swab would match up. And right where it matched up, it's much easier to see that way if there's a difference or not. If you hold two separate samples side by side, it's not as good as a comparison as if it's a single swab across both samples.
Right.
So one half of the page stayed inside a closed book, and the other half went into my window. So that's the way I set up the tests.
Right.
And I should say that these tests were not scientific by any means. These were really done for my own purposes because I'm a crazy artist, and I was just curious what would happen. And they're not necessarily going to be the same as anybody else's results. So I would really encourage everybody to do their own tests. It's not that hard. Here in the Northeast, we're not getting that much light this time of year. So really these ink samples were in a window where they were lit for a few hours a day. It's a northeast winter, so the UV levels are fairly low. It's through window glass. But for me, it's perfect because those are the conditions under which I work on and under which my work would be exposed,
Right.
similar conditions. So I wanted to know how my tests would fare under those conditions.
Sure. I mean, that makes perfect sense. When we originally did the post kind of stating that, you were doing this test and that we were going to have you on Right Time here, we did get someone that said that the test wasn't very scientific and that it,
And it's not.
well, yeah,
Right.
and I don't think that was the point. It was out of mere curiosity, and you can get as scientific as you want about this kind of stuff, but this was really more of just a curiosity thing. This is on your personal blog, so obviously you're gonna just kind of share what your experience has been. So anybody that is interested in kind of learning a more scientific method, you're more than welcome to explore that on your own. This is merely meant as almost for entertainment purposes, or maybe just for the purpose of inciting a conversation about what this is all about, because you're really the only, I mean, I don't have a huge grip on the art world, but you're the only one that I've really seen that has really kind of taken a hold of this watercolor washing, or I don't know if watercolor washing is the right way to say it, this ink washing.
Well, I think a lot of people are doing it. I think that a lot of people are looking for inks that don't wash. I kind of like inks that do wash because I feel that it sort of harmonizes my painting. When I add the watercolor to it, that color of the ink sort of mingles with the color of the watercolor. And depending on what result I want, I've more recently chosen inks that have a color, that have something to add to the story, rather than just a neutral ink, which I feel stands out a little bit too much. But, my tastes change. I go from one thing to another all the time, and I'm sure most artists do. And I view a sketchbook like an artist's playground, because my real work is I'm out there doing oil paintings of the Hudson River. So for me, this is where I just play with art materials and go from one thing to another. So the experiments with ink have been great, and I learned a lot by doing the testing. And I did say on my blog, I went through exactly how I set up the tests, so that those of you who are interested can go ahead and do your own tests for other inks. And
Sure.
I do have a lot more ink samples that I want to test, and I tested I think about 40 inks before this batch of 32 Eternal inks. So I guess altogether I've tested over 70 inks. And I probably have another 50 here that I want to test really soon. So hopefully I can just keep putting out the information as I get it.
Yeah, I know. I'm curious to see because, some of the ones you did in your previous tests. Now, granted, these are just more or less random inks that you had laying around. Maybe some that you used for washing or some that you just happened to
not
have.
so random. I mean, I chose them for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the inks that you have are ones that you chose because you wanted to try them and use them for your purposes. But it was interesting to see which ones fared better than others. And there is a bit of mystery that goes into what makes these fountain pens work, what makes these inks kind of tick. There's chemistry involved in these fountain pen inks that we can understand kind of the basics of it, but the formulations are all proprietary, and there's no ink maker out there that I'm aware of that shares detailed information about how they manufacture their inks and what components they use. So it is a little bit of a mystery sometimes what goes into these things and how one ink is completely different from another, even within the same brand. So it is really interesting to see just kind of the spread of how even in this more practical testing, just how the results have kind of come out. So,
yeah. Well, I was never really that concerned about it because usually when I use inks in my sketchbook, I don't have to worry about it. It's in a closed book. But I have to say, when I started doing the testing, some of those inks completely disappeared in just a few days. So that concerned me. I'm not so sure that I would use those even in my sketchbook. Because you never know if you're going to leave the book open on a desk and you're going to go back and it's going to be gone.
That's true. I mean, anybody that has a concern about that, I think that's where the interest lies in these kinds of tests. So I guess let's kind of dive in here and let's see. You posted a full list on your blog, and I've got it posted on Ink Nouveau of all of the inks that the Noodler's Eternal inks that we had, and frankly, I don't
actually. Do you want me to put up a link to that?
Yeah, if you could put up a link in the chat, that would be great.
Whoops.
And we can be sure to post that as well when we post the video. But basically, it's 32 Noodler's colors that are all rated as Eternal, that are UV resistant. So let's see here. I don't know if that.
All right. So maybe what I should do first is tell you what did not change. So of the 32 inks that I tested, there were 14 inks that so far have not changed. And now I have to say, they've only been in the window maybe 6 weeks. And that's not a lot of time. And I will take them down again in another 6 months, and then we'll have really a better idea of what's going to change. So the inks that have fared the best so far are these. These are all in the Noodler's Eternal line. Black Erase, Water Race, Heart of Darkness, Polar Black, X Feather, Lexington Gray, which might be showing a slight color shift, but I'm still putting it into the top category because it was so slight that I wasn't sure it was there.
Okay.
Bad Blue Heron, Luxury Blue, Polar Blue, Polar Green, Kung To Chang, Lorraine Mauve, the number 41 Brown, that's the 2012 version.
Yeah, the reformulated version.
Yeah, and Polar Brown. So now, of those that I just listed, there were 2 surprises for me in that batch. One was the number 41, the new number 41, and I was telling this to Brian earlier today. The new version of number 41 fared a lot better than the old version. The old version didn't do terrible, because that was in my first round of tests. There were certainly inks that did a lot worse, but this one is definitely better in the light fastness division than the old one. And the other surprise to me was Lexington Gray, because I didn't really see a shift after 6 weeks, and the previous Lexington Gray that I tried, which was definitely from a different bottle, because Brian, that That last batch was the one that you sent me, whereas the first one I did was from my own bottle of Lexington Gray ink. So whether something changed in that ink or not, I don't know. But if it did, it changed for the better.
Well, that's good.
That's good to hear.
One thing I want to note about the number 41 Brown, some people may be curious as to why number 41 Brown was reformulated. Number 41 Brown was reformulated because apparently some of the raw materials that went into making the original formulation, the cost of the raw materials kind of skyrocketed, as Nathan said. So he basically had to find alternative materials, and he did, and it actually looked like it was going to be discontinued altogether. He was able to reformulate it so that the properties were very similar. The color is very similar, but there apparently, especially in this testing, there is a difference in the performance a little bit of the old versus the new, and basically the feedback I've gotten from a lot of different uses of the ink is the reformulation is pretty much for the better. So I think Nathan really kind of hit a home run with the reformulation of that 41 Brown, because it was kind of almost an upset in the fountain pen world when it was known that ink might be discontinued, because it's a really nice brown, and it's very popular, and there aren't a lot of waterproof browns out there. So the whole reformulation thing, that was mainly due to Nathan just wanting to keep the ink around, because otherwise, because of the cost, he wouldn't have been able to continue to make it. Or if he did, that he would have to sell it at such a cost that it would not be economical, for him to offer it. And if anybody knows Nathan Tardif, he's all about being economical. So if he had to increase his price, he wouldn't have made the ink. So, and then the Lexington Gray thing, we kind of talked about this earlier, Jamie, but I'm not aware of any reformulation, any formal official reformulation of Lexington Gray.
Right.
But it does bring up an interesting point that each of the Noodler's inks are made in small batches by hand by Nathan Tardif. All of the Noodler's inks are made by him, and it's well known for anybody who's used the brand for a while, and it says on the Noodler's website that slight variations from batch to batch are not unusual. I've noticed very seldom. We've been carrying the ink for about a year and 5 months now, and there have been some inks here and there that have shifted color just a little bit. Nothing, too wild and earth-shattering, but it's not incredibly uncommon, but it's Nathan, for what he's doing, makes them quite consistent. So I'm guessing that's what probably happened with the Lexington Gray, is that you had an older bottle that was a different batch, and then what I sent you was one that we had gotten in that was newer, that was from a separate batch, and maybe there was some component. Again, I really don't know what goes into these things, but there was some component that might have been a little bit different that somehow enhanced the UV resistance of the ink.
Yeah, we'll know more too down the road, because that last test that I did ran for 6 months, so it's possible that it may still show signs of fading down the road. And it was tested at a time when there was stronger sunlight too. It was tested in the spring and summer. So. Okay, so maybe we'll go on to the inks that have changed the most.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll tell you what the ink is, and I have the sheets in front of me, and I'm hoping to get these photographed within the next few days and get you copies to put up on Ink Nouveau so that people can actually see the differences in the tests.
Sure.
But here, of the ones that changed the most, there were 10 inks that I felt changed the most. One was Periwinkle, which turned redder and more violet. One was Hunter Green, which seemed to be losing that. Hunter Green is a pretty bright green, but it seemed to be losing some of that yellow component and turning more of a dusky green, kind of more like polar green or bad green gator seems to be heading in that direction. The Dostoevsky has turned from turquoise to gray.
Interesting.
There is absolutely no turquoise left in that color. It's still there. I can still see the ink on the page, but it's faded and it's gray.
Interesting.
Year of the Golden Pig. It faded and it went a little more to the greener side of yellow, so it's cooled a little bit. All of the reds changed at least a little.
Yeah.
So Empire Red turned a little more pink. Noodler's Fox faded and got more of a sort of turning like a rusty color, a reddish brown. And really has faded quite a bit. That one surprised me. Rachmaninoff has turned sort of more pink and less violet.
Okay.
Tchaikovsky has also turned more pink, not so violet. Pasternak has changed a lot, sort of to a maroon pink color instead of the violet. And Whaleman Sepia has changed to brown. So that was a surprise too. Whaleman Sepia I also have a 6-month test on that I had done previously. And again, I don't know if it has been reformulated. I suspect not. I think I'm just pulling out my previous chart here, the one that was in the window for 6 months, just to take a look at these side by side. Bear with me for just 1 second.
Sure. I will say one thing while you're looking it up about Whaleman Sepia. That's a very interesting ink that has a lot of history to why it's made. And one of the neat features about that ink is that if you pour bleach on it, it will turn red. Now, I have no idea why it does that or how that may be factored into the UV exposure, or if the UV will emulate that bleach or anything like that. I'm no scientist, but I know Nathan has a video out there on Ink Need Last Forever. That's his YouTube channel, and he's got a video on there about the Manjiro Nakahama Whaleman Sepia, and he does that in there, and it has this big long explanation of why it does that. But basically it's kind of a forge resistance quality to it that normally bleach washing is one of the ways that forgers try to get ink off of paper, and if you put bleach on this ink, it'll turn red and you'll know that it's been forged, or tried to be forged. So
maybe this is intentional, and so whatever the component of the ink is that's susceptible to that is playing a role here.
I would have to surmise,
it's turning reddish brown.
Yeah, I know from talking to Nathan, I don't know about what properties are in the ink, but I know that there are a few of his inks that are much more complicated to make than others. Kung Ta Cheng, he says, is one of the hardest inks to make. Dragon's Napalm is not in this test, but it's another one that is very difficult to make. And Whaleman Sepia is another one that's a real challenge to make. Something having to do with the chemistry and the different components, and having things that I don't really know exactly what's all involved, but apparently he says it's an extreme challenge to make, and I believe him if he tells me that. So I really don't know how that might factor in, but I would have to believe that an ink that has an extremely unique property, such as changing colors when bleach is put on it, would have to be doing something different than most other inks due to UV exposure as well.
Yeah.
But again, that's just completely my opinion, non-scientific, all the way.
Looking at the sample that was in my window previously, I I can't really tell if it's acting the same way or not because it was in the window so much longer. It looks like it still has more gray black in it, whereas the one that I just did seems to really be turning reddish brown. But we'll know in another 6 months, I guess, if it matches or not.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So that concludes the ones that have changed the most, and then there are 6 others that changed very slightly, and I can tell you what those were. They were L. Lawrence, which had a very slight color shift. L. Lawrence has a really nice color to that ink.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite a dead black. It sort of has a greenish, yellowish tint to it.
Yeah. A lot of people say that it looks like used motor oil.
Okay.
And I think that's the intention.
That has turned more gray, so
Okay.
that it kind of lost that motor oil look, I guess.
Okay.
Bad Belted Kingfisher had a slight fade and a very slight color shift. Got a little bit more turquoisey. Not a lot. Just, this is, at this point, just the direction I see it heading in.
Okay.
Bad Green Gator. It's really slight, very slight fade, but it kept the same color. Just it looks a very slightly bit lighter.
Okay.
Socrates. Let me find that here. Also, slight color shift. It looks a little bit redder and a little bit faded, but it's very slight.
Okay.
And Matahari's Cordial, very slight fade. And Bad Black Moccasin has shifted color. And interestingly, it looks like it's still just as dark. It's just a warmer black. Slightly warmer black than it was.
Interesting.
So that's the 32 of them.
Well, that's very interesting. I don't know a whole lot about why these inks fade. The one thing I do know is that anything dye based, which is pretty much most, if not all, fountain pen inks are dye based. They are really not ideal for resisting ultraviolet rays. UV resistance is one of those qualities of fountain pen ink that's really pushing the envelope in terms of what they're designed to do. I'll say that.
Definitely.
As far as pushing them to the extreme, which I would pretty much consider this type of testing to be pushing them to the extreme, it's kind of uncharted territory as to which ones are going to perform the best. And a lot of the reason that some of these are shifting color, like you mentioned, is probably due to the fact that, there are not always pure dyes available.
Right, so one component is getting filtered out.
Exactly. So if you have, say, a particular shade of blue, it may not be a pure blue. It may be part blue, it may be part yellow, it may be part red, and you may have a red component that's failing, and you may have a yellow and a blue left, and so it kind of shifts to a green color. There's things like that. That's just an example that I'm throwing out there. But if anybody's wondering why it might be changing color, I'd suspect that that's why, is because there's some particular component that is failing, but others are holding solid. So I would say that, personally, I'm a retailer. I represent Noodlers and I carry the inks, and I didn't have any financial motivation to doing this test. And honestly, I kind of sent the inks to Jamie, and I was like, see what happens. And I was like, I kind of crossed my fingers that I hope they turn out well, but I really don't know. I mean, I have full confidence in Nathan Tardif and his abilities, and I believe he says UV resistant, that he's not lying, but I really didn't know what to expect. And just from my personal opinion, having inks fading and shifting color to, a degree in this fashion, I'm not shocked. And I wouldn't say that the inks are failing or misadvertised, because this is a fairly extreme case of their intended use. Sorry, go ahead.
There's a difference in the definition between in artist materials and fountain pen folks. And for example, when fountain pen people say that something is waterproof, what they mean is that if you run it under a faucet, it won't completely disappear. Mm-hmm. Whereas when artists say that something is waterproof, they're saying, if you scrub it, none of it's going to move. If you put watercolor over it, it's not going to budge.
Right.
So they're really coming from different terminology. And I think the same thing happens with UV resistance, where by artist terms, if something is light fast, you're talking about something that can hang on a wall exposed to light for like over 100 years with nothing happening. Mm. Fountain pen people that say UV resistant, they're not considering hanging something for 100 years in light.
Right. Nor would I recommend that at all. I mean, you think about. Sorry, go ahead.
I can say that having tested a lot of inks already, and actually I have tested several of these Eternal inks previously, I do think that they hold up better than the other fountain pen inks that I've tested. Mm-hmm. Kung to Chang, I already had a test with that where it was in my window for 6 months, and it did not change in 6 months. It did not change.
That's pretty impressive.
So that's, just to be able to say that's huge.
Yeah.
That's really huge.
Absolutely.
And actually, now I see I have the bulletproof black done too. That was in my window for 6 months. That looks pretty good. The one that was there for 6 months. I don't think any of the others fared that well. 6 months, no.
Interesting. Yeah.
And there are some inks I haven't tested that I would really like to test, like the platinum pigmented inks.
Oh yeah, I was gonna suggest that because I know that's one that, at least from the feedback I get from some of our customers who kind of dip their toes in both the fountain pen and the art pool, if you will, the platinum carbon black is kind of, a staple ink over there in the art world.
That one really is waterproof, more so than the Noodler's bulletproof black.
Yeah, and the part of the reason for that is it's not purely a dye-based ink. It's actually pigmented. There's several inks out there that are pigmented for fountain pen use. Now, they're very, very fine pigments because when you're dealing with a fountain pen, you've got to have something that flows through a pretty constricted space. And most pigmented inks, especially things that are, shellac-based and things that you would use for dip pens and calligraphy and brush pens are typically not recommended for fountain pen use. It's only a handful of inks that I can recall are really even very usable at all in fountain pens that are pigment based. Some of them are, platinum has the most of them. The platinum carbon black, platinum pigmented blue, they have a pigmented rose red and a pigmented sepia. And then the Sailor, what's typically known as the nano inks, so the Seiboku and the Kiwaguro. Those are both pigmented as well.
Well, if Sailor can do it and Platinum can do it, it's kind of surprising that more companies haven't jumped on that bandwagon.
Well, I think the reason for it is because those are both Japanese-based companies, and they probably have a lot of people that are using them in brush pens to do character work in Japan and Asia. So I imagine it's not that other companies couldn't do it, it's that most of the other companies are based out of Europe, where there's not a lot of brush work necessarily that's going on. And so there's probably it's not much on their radar.
But if they could perform in fountain pens, then that has appeal to people who are not necessarily using brushes, people who are writing or calligraphers.
That's true. I agree. I agree wholeheartly. It's I think that most of the European companies that carry inks have been carrying them for a very long time, and there's only a few ink companies that I could really name that are trying to develop and push the envelope and innovate and create new inks. Noodler's is by far the leader in terms of ink chemistry and really trying to create, interesting inks and inks that can do things that have never been tried with fountain pen inks before.
Well, and maybe Nathan would do something with pigmented inks. Maybe you can have a chat with him.
That is interesting, especially because the luxury brands who distributes Noodlers also distributes platinum. So, I know that our distributor who we work through deals with both of those. And so, it's not the first time I've been asked if Nathan would be willing to do a pigmented ink. I will have to inquire with him about that. I think that would be really interesting to see. And, I'll have to see what his take is on it. I don't know if it has to do with economics or cost or what. Nathan has some interesting motivations for why he does things sometimes, but it's definitely worth me asking. So I won't promise anything, but...
And the AHABs have become really popular among artists now, too. A lot of them are using them. So a pigmented ink that would work in the AHAB, you'd think they'd go hand in hand.
Yeah, I will ask him about that. I think that's a great thing, and maybe if it's something that he's not willing to produce on a mass scale, it's certainly something that we could look at as an exclusive ink to us. He's done that before. We've got kind of an exclusive deal on Kung De Chang and Whaleman Sepia, several other inks, some of the Russian and UK inks, and of course Purple Heart is the one that we developed specifically for us with Nathan. So I know he's willing to do that kind of stuff. I'm curious because he's developed something like 300 different fountain pen inks. Between all of his standard line, all of the stuff that he regularly offers, and then all of the different exclusives around the world. He's got, a whole line of things in Southeast Asia and the UK and Russia and, various countries around the world that he has exclusive to them. So I think it's interesting. I don't know if he's ever done pigmented. So that's curious. I will definitely inquire about that.
Right?
Yeah. But yeah. So somebody's asking, what would that be? Oh, I don't know what they're asking. The Kung De Chang, they soaked it in a 50-50 water bleach mix for 24 hours. The ink was fine, and the paper did not feel well. I think that's Nathan's idea, is that with his forgery-resistant inks, that the ink will outlast the paper. That if you're a forger and you're trying to get rid of the ink and you end up destroying the paper in the process, essentially you failed in trying to forge it. So
De Chang is such a great ink. It doesn't wash. It really stays put on the page. I love that.
Oh, Goodlers. That's what you wrote. Okay, Goulet and Noodlers together. I didn't know what you were reading. I thought it was a mistype. They called it Goodlers. Okay, that's funny. Yeah. So that's interesting. I'm really glad that you did this test. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you, Brian.
To do
it was really a good opportunity to go through them all and do it. And I'm glad that I did, and I learned a lot from doing it. And I'm looking forward to doing more of them.
Sure, and hopefully I'm hoping that it's going to get two things out of this. Hopefully it'll create kind of awareness, and maybe maybe you'll help some other people out who are very conscientious about UV resistance in their particular application, especially in the art world. That maybe they'll be motivated to take that into consideration and maybe do some of their own experimentation. But also just for people who, that's not necessarily their primary function, but it may give them something to think about when possibly purchasing future inks and considering using them, in different fashions. And
deciding what to leave out on your desk.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know there's some inks that, like you said, in a matter of hours, even can be affected, and
yes.
And if some of the inks, like you mentioned, like Noodler's Bulletproof Black, I mean, that is, I would say, arguably the most popular Noodler's ink color, and probably the single most popular fountain pen color in the world. I
Wow.
think I could fairly safely say that, just because of all around its properties, how waterproof it is, how UV resistant it is, how well it handles, and such a wide variety of pens. And Nathan's really done a tremendous job with that ink. It's definitely a staple ink in the fountain pen world, probably in the art world too. But that is interesting to hear. How well that one holds up specifically.
Well, another one that holds up really well that I love is Lorraine Mauve.
Yeah.
That ink also it doesn't budge. You can't wash it. It stays put, and it has not changed in the light fastness test.
That is very interesting. So, somebody in the chat asked, "Did you test platinum carbon black?" You must have just missed that a couple minutes ago. That's one on her list.
I really want to. I have it. I have a bottle of it, so I can, and I do plan to put it up on the next round. The next round, I've decided to do a little bit differently, and I've cut some cards out of Strathmore 500 Bristol, which is very high-end paper, and when I'm testing inks, I write it out on this card, and I'm putting half in a box. I'm going to put the other half in the window. So I have maybe 20 that I've done, and maybe another 20 that I want to put up with those. So as soon as I get a chance, I want to add the platinum carbon black to that test. And I wish I had the other pigmented platinum inks, and I would put them up too. But
I'll send you some.
Ones.
I'll send you some. I can send you samples of those if you'd like to test those, because I'm curious.
Well, that would be great.
To know. Yeah.
Because those, I think, are the only pigmented ones. Well, you said there's some sailors too, but I would really like to get some of those pigmented inks up in the window. And
sure. I mean, I can.
They hold up better.
I can safely say I can send you samples of those and of the sailor ones as well. I can give you every pigmented I have that you'd need for your testing. I'm
That'd
curious
be great, and then I'll put up the other 40 or 50 that I have along with them.
Wonderful. Yeah, you'll be busy.
And then we'll have round two.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, I very much look forward to seeing how they hold up over even more time. But I appreciate you taking even the last 6 weeks to do this test, and hopefully we'll do another blog post and get some pictures up of how the tests have come out. Of course, anybody who hasn't seen Hudson Valley Sketches, I definitely recommend that you go check it out. It's a great blog. You've done not just stuff with fountain pen ink washing, but you do just a lot of other great artwork too. And it's just
thank you, Brian.
It's always you're welcome. It's always inspiring just to see artists like yourself just doing neat stuff. And I'm not too involved in the art world, but I really enjoy just kind of cruising and seeing your pictures and seeing what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, I would imagine that if I sold ink, it would be really fun to go out and then see what happens with what I've sold, and
sure,
how it develops into something else.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, or if anybody had any questions in the chat here. We're going to kind of wrap this up, and
Well, thank you for having me on. And,
thank you for taking time today.
My pleasure. So I'll be talking to you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jamie. I really appreciate it, and we will talk to you in a little bit.
Okay, good night, everybody.
All right, thanks, Jamie. Bye. All right, so there you go. That is Jamie Grossman. I will be posting a link on Ink Nouveau along with the posting of this video for her blog. And if you had any questions or anything more specific, you can always email me at brian@gouletpens.com. Or Jamie, I will have to get you her email address, but you can definitely check out her blog and probably get to it through there. So if you guys have any other questions, let us know. Otherwise, we will kind of wrap this up. Sorry that Rachel had to kind of skip out, but Ellie was being, an 8-week-old baby, and she took her off into the other room and kind of whisked her away. It was, we love the little girl, but she can be a little distracting sometimes during these broadcasts. So that's why we kind of, I was winging it kind of solo here with the broadcast. But anyway, I think it all turned out okay. Let's see here. You tried to mix the tea by J.R. Bond with Lexington, but it turned into a chemical mess. What ink would be the closest? Well, anytime you're mixing across brands, especially across properties, like Lexington is a waterproof ink and J.R. Bond is not, you can expect something might go awry. J.R. Bond even says on their ink bottles not to mix it even within their own brand. Now, that's probably a little extreme. I think you could probably mix their inks within the brand, but whenever you're mixing across brands, that's where it gets a little dicey. What ink would be the closest? The T. You guys are talking about the T. I don't really know what you're talking about with the whole T thing, but maybe shoot me an email about the color you're trying to get to. I can't think of anything right off the bat. Well, ink stain white pens like the Lamy Safari or Pelican. Typically not, especially if it's modern plastic. Those usually don't get stained very easily, and if it does get any kind of stain, it just wipes right off. Those are pretty resistant to that kind of thing, so that usually is not a problem. The only time you really deal with a lot of staining is typically if you have vintage pens with maybe some more, I don't want to say primitive, but some earlier developed plastics that are more absorbent than what modern plastics are. Those can be a problem, or especially the vintage filling mechanisms like rubber sacks and aerometric sacks and things like that. Those tend to stain quite easily. But modern pens, typically staining is not an issue. But of course that varies ink to ink as well. But anyway, it is about 10 o'clock, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up and check on my wife and little baby. Thank you guys for joining us in the broadcast here. We will, I'm not sure if we'll be back next week. It might be the week after. We may end up going to every other week for these broadcasts, just because Rachel and I are, having a hard time maintaining every week now with 2 kids and our business. It's a little much, but, we'll kind of play it by ear. So thank you. We really appreciate it. Had a great time, and we will, I guess, see you around in the ink and pen world. All right. Good night, everybody.